thank you for tuning in once again. We are going to go over Christ's millennial kingdom, the 1,000 years of peace, and its destruction. So, this is the first part of an 8-part series where I'm going to explain what the millennial kingdom is, show you how it's already happened, show you that we are in the short season that Satan is going to be loosed, and how who the Antichrist is and how they are being resurrected in this last moment to now have the judgment be upon us. So, part one, what is the millennial kingdom? Okay, so the millennial kingdom is the title given to the 1,000-year reign of Jesus Christ on the earth. Some seek to interpret the 1,000 years in an allegorical manner. They understand the 1,000 years as merely a figurative way of saying a long period of time, not a literal physical reign of Jesus Christ on the earth. However, 6 times in Revelation 20:2 through 7, the millennial kingdom is specifically said to be 1,000 years in length. If God wished to communicate a long period of time, he could have easily done so without explicitly and repeatedly mentioning an exact time frame. So continued, the Bible tells us that when Christ returns to the earth, he will establish himself as king in Jerusalem, sitting on the throne of David, which is Luke 1:32 to 33. The unconditional covenants demand a literal physical return of Christ to establish the kingdom. The Abrahamic covenant promised Israel a land, a posterity and ruler, and a spiritual blessing. That's in Genesis 12:1 to 3. The Palestinian covenant promised Israel a restoration to the land and occupation of the land. Deuteronomy 30:1 through 10. The Davidic covenant promised Israel a king from David's line who would rule forever, giving the nation rest from all their enemies. 2 Samuel 7:10 to 13. At the second coming, these covenants will be fulfilled as Israel is regathered from the nations. Matthew 24:31. Converted, Zechariah 12:10 to 14, and restored to the land under the rule of the Messiah Jesus Christ. The Bible speaks of the conditions during the millennium as a perfect environment physically and spiritually. It will be a time of peace, Micah 4:2 to 4, Isaiah 32:17 to 18, joy, Isaiah 61:7 and 10, and comfort, Isaiah 40:1 and 2. The Bible also tells us that only believers will enter the millennial kingdom. Because of this, it will be a time of obedience, Jeremiah 31:33, holiness, Isaiah 35:8, truth, Isaiah 65:16, and the knowledge of God, Isaiah 11:9, Habakkuk 2:14. Christ will rule as king, Isaiah 9:3 to 7, also in 11:1 to 10. Nobles and governors will also rule, Isaiah 32:1, Matthew 19:28, and Jerusalem will be the political center of the world, Zechariah 8:3. Okay, so there are several different versions of what the millennial kingdom may look like, and there's different people who have different opinions. So we're going to go over them right now. So first we have the anti-millennialism. Anti-millennialism has two branches of interpretation. Both postulate that Jesus will come and then, after defeating the Antichrist, will rule the earth with the elect for 1,000 years before the evil souls are resurrected and Satan is unbound in the resurrected Christ. They differ significantly concerning the events around the second coming. So, first one you have is dispensational anti-millennialism. While both agree that it will occur during a 7-year period of tribulation when the Antichrist reigns, one places the return of the Jews to Israel and the rebuilding of the temple during the 7-year period, while the other holds that Jesus will reestablish Jerusalem as his capital, rebuilding of the temple during his reign. The former determines that the past elect of church will be raised to life before the tribulation starts, and then chosen to rule with the descended Jesus, while the righteous Jews will be resurrected along with heroes who stood against the Antichrist and died at the end of the tribulation, heralding his reign of peace and plenty. The latter holds that the rapture of all the elect, these being all the dead saints of Christianity and the righteous of Judaism before the advent of Christ, will be at the second coming of Jesus, and will thereafter constitute with their offspring the deserving citizens of the millennium rule. When Satan is finally loosed in the resurrected Antichrist, a great battle will be fought with the minions of Satan, and Satan, the false prophet, will be defeated and hurled into hell, ushering in the end of the world. Here again, the two branches differ. The historian sees Gog and Magog as the nations Satan leads in rebellion when he is loosed, while the dispensationalist, although he agrees Satan will lead an army of deceived nations, does not place the Gog and Magog as being among them. All right, so now we can look at the timeline of events that this particular viewpoint has. And you see the cross right here is representative of Jesus dying on the cross. Then you have the church age. After the church age, you have the righteous dead raised. Then you have, during that, you have the rapture, which begins the tribulation of 7 years. That's when Christ descends. That's when the reign of the Antichrist happens, which is the 70th week of Daniel 7. And that's the restoration of the Jews to Palestine, conversion of remnants of Israel, temple rebuilt, priesthood, sacrifices, cult ritual uh, restored. So that they're going to be doing some very evil stuff in that time. Then at the second half of the tribulation, you have Revelation, which is at the very end of tribulation. Then that goes into the tribulation saints and Old Testament believers raised. And that's so you have them raised right after, like immediately after the Battle of Armageddon and the destruction of the Antichrist. Then the Millennium Kingdom, that's when Satan is bound. And then Satan will be loosed. And at the end of Satan being loosed is the judgment of the wicked. And then that goes into the eternal state. All right, so now we have the historical anti millennialism. After the defeat of the forces of evil, mountains will crumble, the earth will become a flat plain, and judgment will be instituted on the people of earth. The true believers in Christ will be rewarded with heaven and eternal communion with God, and the disbelievers and unrepentant sinners will be consigned to hell and eternal separation from God. All right, so here is their timeline of events. You have Christ on the cross, then the church age, the great apostasy, and then the tribulation with the Antichrist reigning. Then at the very beginning, to kick off the millennial kingdom, when Satan is bound, you have the righteous dead are raised, and also the rapture, and Christ descends. Jews are converted right at the beginning of the millennium. And also, you have the battle of Armageddon and the destruction of the Antichrist, all happening at the beginning of the millennium. So then, during the millennium, Satan is bound, the temple is rebuilt, priesthood sacrifices, cult rituals restored. Actually, I don't know if that says restored. I can't see what it says. I guess it wouldn't be restored. So forgive me. I can't read. I can't make out what that says. Then you'll have Satan loosed. Then you have the battle of Gog and Magog. Then you will have the wicked dead raised, and immediately following the wicked dead being raised, the great white throne judgment, which then has the eternal state. All right, so then you have preterism. Preterism is the general name for the viewpoint found in both the views that oppose antimillennialism. It sees the return of Jesus as having already happened at the time of the destruction of the temple, Jerusalem, at least in terms of judgment. That is, they see people as judged when they die. Hence, it sees the earth itself as everlasting, and that perfecting our faith in the truth about God is a never ending task set us by God. Among the partial preterists, the moment of perfection is the second physical coming of Jesus, who will then reign forever over those who have achieved salvation. So there's two branches of this. There's post-millennialism. Post-millennialism sees the 1,000-year reign of Jesus as more figurative than literal, and that it has already begun. Jesus is literally the king of earth right now, judging the dead as they die, and the Christian church is in the process of perfecting belief in him and defeating Satan. Then Jesus will return to vanquish the Antichrist, heralding the end of the world and establish the church to rule with him. So here is their timeline. So you have Christ on the cross, and then you get to the present age, which that's where they believe we are in the present age, obviously. And from the present age to the eternal state, you have the world will become better. It's gradually becoming better. The gospel will increase and advance, gradual Christianization of the world, and that will end at the eternal state. And this group of people does not think it's a literal 1,000 years, but that it's a gradual thing. And at the beginning of the eternal state to begin it, the general resurrection of righteous and wicked and final judgment. So it's very simple in what these people believe, not as complicated as the first two. Not that the complicated ones aren't correct. I'm just saying this is a more simple timeline. So you also have amillennialism. Amillennialism also sees the 1,000-year reign as figurative and already established, but like antimillennialism, it emphasizes Judgment Day as the day of sorting out the good from the bad and eternally consigning them to their respective destinations. So again, we look at their timeline of events. You have the cross, Christ being crucified. You have the present age, and then we are in the millennium now. The consummation is not yet, and it's just a straight line across. It's not a gradual thing like the post-millennialism. Then you have Christ's return, and you have the general resurrection of righteous and wicked, and final judgment to begin the eternal state. All right, so then there's the Islamic viewpoint, and I want to bring that in because the Christians aren't the only ones who believe Jesus' return will be the end of the earth in the way that it always has been. So Islam sees Jesus' return as a completion of his life and work, which he left incomplete. As the true Messiah, he alone has the power granted to him by God to defeat the false Messiah at the end of time. His rule will witness the invasion of the Gog and Magog, whom not even he will be able to defeat. Rather, he will pray to God, who will then destroy them himself. The end of the Gog and Magog will herald the beginning of a world hegemony in which everyone will believe or at least submit to his reign as God's representative. He will rule by God's law as taught by Muhammad, i.e., Islam. May the mercy and blessings of God be upon him until he dies at the age of about 70 or 75. In this period of time, there will be plenty for all and peace throughout the world. Then, sometime after he dies and is buried, all the Muslims will be caught up by a breeze and wafted into the hereafter. The remaining people on earth will be unbelievers, and they alone will witness the final chapter of earth. And that is the end of part one. Thank you all for being here. Please like, share, subscribe, and we will see you on the next one.